Hello guys. Welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash's true mastery was the power to evolve any Pokemon to its final form instantly. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The spark of ascension. The roar of the crowd was a physical force, a wave of sound that washed over the battlefield and beat against Ash's chest. It was the final round of the Silver Conference Championship, a battle that had come down to the wire, a razor's edge of skill and endurance. On one side of the field, Harrison's Blaziken stood, a titan of fire and fury, its body wreathed in shimmering heat. On Ash's side, his Pikachu was down, and all that remained was a Pokemon he had only recently welcomed to his team. A young, spirited Larvitar, barely out of its egg and trembling with a mixture of fear and defiance. The referee's voice cut through the din, sharp and clear. Pikachu is unable to battle. Ash Ketchum has one Pokemon remaining. The victory will go to Harrison of Littleroot Town unless Ash's final Pokemon can defeat Blaziken. From the stands, Misty leaned forward, her knuckles white where she gripped the railing. He's not going to use Larvitar, is he? It's too young, too inexperienced. Blaziken will tear it apart. Beside her, Brock's eyes were narrowed in thought, his usual calm demeanor strained. He has no choice, Misty. It's either forfeit or trust in his Pokemon, and you know Ash. Ash looked at Larvitar, seeing the tremor in its small, rock-hard body. He saw the doubt in its eyes, the overwhelming pressure of the moment. But beneath that, he saw something else, a flicker of the same stubborn fire that burned in all of his Pokemon, the same refusal to back down. He knelt, his voice low and steady, a private conversation in the midst of a public spectacle. "Hey," he said, his gaze locking with Larvitar's. "I know this is a lot. I know you're scared. But I believe in you. I know you can do this." He didn't offer a grand strategy, no complex plan of attack. He offered something simpler, something more potent, his unwavering faith. Larvitar looked up at him, and in that moment, something shifted. The trembling subsided, replaced by a new, solid resolve. It took a deep breath, its small chest puffing out, and let out a defiant cry that was lost in the roar of the stadium but was heard perfectly by the one person who mattered. Harrison, from across the field, gave a respectful nod. "A brave choice, Ash. But bravery won't be enough. Blaziken, Blaze Kick." The Blaziken became a blur of motion, a comet of fire and muscle, rocketing across the field. Ash's mind raced, his years of battle experience kicking in. Larvitar was too slow to dodge, too small to withstand a direct hit. There was only one option. "Larvitar, use Dig," he yelled, his voice cracking with urgency. Larvitar responded instantly, burrowing into the earth just as Blaziken's fiery foot slammed into the spot where it had been standing, sending a shower of dirt and rock into the air. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that created a momentary pocket of silence. "Now, Larvitar, come up and use Bite," Ash commanded. The ground behind Blaziken erupted, and Larvitar shot out, its jaws wide, aiming for the larger Pokemon's leg. But Harrison was a seasoned trainer, his connection with his Pokemon a seamless bond. "Blaziken, jump and use Sky Uppercut." Blaziken coiled and sprang, its powerful legs launching it into the air, twisting its body to meet the ascending Larvitar with a devastating uppercut. The blow connected with a sickening thud, sending Larvitar flying, its small body arcing through the air before crashing to the ground in a crumpled heap. A hush fell over the stadium. It was over. There was no way such a young Pokemon could survive a hit like that from a fully evolved starter. The referee raised his flag, ready to call the match. But Ash didn't look away. He didn't accept defeat. He felt a surge of something hot and fierce in his chest, a desperate, primal need to protect his Pokemon, to not let it end like this. He saw Larvitar stir, its tiny body pushing itself up, one limb at a time, fueled by a stubbornness that mirrored his own. "Larvitar," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He saw the pain in its eyes, the exhaustion weighing it down. But he also saw that flicker of fire, now burning brighter, refusing to be extinguished. It wanted to keep fighting. It believed in him. And in that moment, the world seemed to slow down. The roar of the crowd faded to a distant hum. The vibrant colors of the stadium bled into a muted gray. All Ash could see was Larvitar, and all he could feel was a white-hot torrent of energy surging through him, a desperate plea and a fierce command all at once. Evolve, he thought, the word a silent scream in his mind. Evolve and show them all what you can do. A light, brilliant and blinding, erupted from Larvitar. It wasn't the slow, shimmering glow of a normal evolution. It was an explosion, a nova of power that forced everyone in the stadium to shield their eyes. The energy pulsed, not in gentle waves, but in violent, concussive blasts that shook the very foundations of the arena. When the light finally receded, what stood in Larvitar's place was no longer a small, timid Pokémon. It was a Pupitar, its body encased in a thick, gray shell, its eyes glowing with a newfound power. But it didn't stop there. The energy intensified, the Pupitar's shell cracking and shattering like an egg, releasing another, even more brilliant, flash of light. From the heart of the light emerged a Tyranitar, a colossal beast of rock and shadow, its body a fortress of dark green armor, its eyes burning with a crimson intensity. It threw its head back and let out a roar that was not just a sound, but a physical force, a shockwave that cracked the stadium walls and sent a tremor through the entire city. The silence that followed was absolute, a stunned, disbelieving void. Harrison's Blaziken, a champion in its own right, took an involuntary step back, its fiery confidence extinguished, replaced by a primal fear. Ash stared, his heart pounding in his chest, a mixture of awe and terror coursing through his veins. He had wanted Larvitar to evolve, yes. He had poured all his hope and desperation into that silent plea. But this was something else entirely. 2 evolutions, back to back, in the span of a few seconds. It was impossible, it was unnatural. The Tyranitar turned its massive head, its crimson eyes locking onto Ash. For a moment, Ash felt a flicker of fear. This was no longer the small, young Pokémon he had known. This was an apex predator, a force of nature. But then, in the depths of those burning eyes, he saw it. The same spirit, the same unwavering loyalty, the same stubborn fire. It was still his Larvitar. A slow smile spread across Ash's face, a genuine, unadulterated expression of pride and relief. You did it, he breathed. You really did it. The Tyranitar let out a low rumble, a sound of affirmation, before turning its attention back to the Blaziken, which now looked like a flickering candle in the face of a hurricane. Harrison, his face pale with shock, finally found his voice. Be Blaziken, flamethrower. The Blaziken summoned its courage and unleashed a torrent of fire, a jet of pure heat that would have incinerated any other opponent. But the Tyranitar simply stood there, unflinching, as the flames washed over its armored hide, leaving not so much as a scorch mark. Our turn, Ash said, his voice now calm, infused with a new, unshakable confidence. Tyranitar, use Stone Edge. With a guttural roar, the Tyranitar slammed its foot into the ground. The earth itself seemed to obey its command, a ring of massive, razor-sharp stones erupting from the battlefield, encircling the terrified Blaziken. Then, with another stomp, the stones shot inward, a closing fist of rock and power. The impact was cataclysmic. When the dust settled, the Blaziken lay in the center of a crater, unconscious, its fiery spirit extinguished. The referee, his face a mask of disbelief, slowly, mechanically, raised his flag. Blaziken is unable to battle. The winner, and the new Silver Conference champion, is Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town. For a moment, there was only silence. The crowd, the commentators, even Misty and Brock, were too stunned to react. Then, a single person began to clap, then another, until the stadium erupted in a deafening ovation, a roar of applause that was even more powerful than before. But Ash barely heard it. He was walking across the ravaged battlefield, his eyes fixed on his Tyranitar, which was already shrinking, its massive form enveloped in a soft light, reverting not to a Pupitar, not to a Larvitar, but to something in between, a form that seemed to hum with a latent, untamed power. As he reached his Pokémon, he placed a hand on its rocky hide, a silent thank you, a silent promise. He didn't understand what had just happened, what this new, terrifying power was that resided within him. But he knew one thing for certain. His journey, the one he thought was nearing its peak, had just begun. Unseen, in the shadowed upper levels of the stadium, a man in a crisp, dark suit lowered a pair of high-powered binoculars, a thin, cold smile playing on his lips. He tapped a small, discreet communication device in his ear. Sir, he said, his voice calm and precise, we have a situation. Anomaly registered. Category 5. The subject's name is Ash Ketchum. I believe we have found our catalyst. Chapter 1 End. The locker room smelled of ozone and damp earth, a strange combination that clung to the air long after the battle had ended. The trophy, a gleaming silver monument to his victory, sat on a bench, its polished surface reflecting the distorted, weary faces of Ash, Misty, and Brock. Outside, the stadium was still buzzing, the roar of the crowd a persistent, happy hum that felt a world away from the quiet confusion inside the small room. Pupitar, the hero of the hour, rested on a towel at Ash's feet. It hadn't reverted to Larvitar, a fact that Brock found both fascinating and deeply unsettling. It was a solid, dense shell of a Pokémon, its inner red eyes glowing with a calm, steady light that seemed far too ancient for a creature so young. "I've never seen anything like it, Ash," Brock said, for the 10th time. He was pacing the small space, his brow furrowed in deep thought. Instantaneous evolution is rare enough. But 2 stages? Back to back. The energy required should have been immense, potentially fatal for a Pokémon as young as Larvitar. But it just did it. And now it's a perfectly healthy, incredibly dense Pupitar. The Pokémon Center scans were off the charts, but showed no signs of strain. "It was our bond," Ash said, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. He was running on pure adrenaline, a dizzying high that couldn't quite mask the profound, bone-deep exhaustion that was settling in. It felt different from his usual post-battle weariness. This was a deeper drain, as if something had been pulled from the very core of his being. "Larvitar knew we had to win. It trusted me, and I trusted it." Misty sat beside him, her usual fiery demeanor replaced by a quiet concern. She gently touched his arm. "Ash, that was more than just trust. That was something else. The light, the power, it felt violent." She shuddered. It was terrifying. He couldn't disagree. He could still feel the echo of it, a phantom current running beneath his skin. It was like he had screamed into a void and something had screamed back, pouring a river of raw, untamed power through him, through Larvitar. He had been a conduit for something vast and primal, and he had no idea what it was. The door swished open and Charles Goodshow, the president of the Pokémon League, bustled in, his wide smile a beacon of official cheer. "There's my champion, Ash, my boy. The press is clamoring for you. What a finish. A battle for the ages. The world is dying to know your secret." Ash forced a smile, the weight of the silver trophy feeling impossibly heavy as he was led out to face a blinding sea of flashing cameras and shouted questions. The presentation was a blur of lights, handshakes, and the polite, meaningless words of ceremony. He gave vague answers about hard work and the power of friendship, the standard platitudes that felt like lies in the face of what had actually happened. All he wanted was to sleep, to quiet the strange hum that still vibrated in his soul. Later that evening, the chaotic energy of the stadium had been replaced by the sterile quiet of the Pokémon Center. Misty and Brock had gone to grab food, leaving Ash alone with his team. Pikachu was sleeping soundly at the foot of his bed, fully recovered and peaceful. The rest of his Pokémon were resting in their Pokéballs, except for Pupitar, who sat on the windowsill, gazing out at the moonlit streets of Silver Town. Ash walked over to it, placing a hand on its hard, cool shell. He felt the faintest thrum of energy from within, a deep, resonant power that was nothing like the frantic fear of the Larvitar he'd known just hours before. "What happened to us out there?" he asked softly. The Pupitar's inner eyes glowed a little brighter, but it gave no answer. He didn't expect one. The question was for himself. He felt a connection to it, a strange new depth to their bond that was both exhilarating and frightening. It was as if a part of him now resided inside that shell, and a part of its immense power was coiled inside his own chest. The videophone on his bedside table chimed, startling him. Professor Oak's face appeared, beaming with pride. "Ash, my boy, I watched the whole thing. Absolutely incredible. A masterful display of courage and strategy." "Thanks, Professor," Ash said, trying to match his mentor's enthusiasm. "But I must admit," Oak continued, his expression shifting from celebratory to intensely curious, "the data from the final evolution has the entire research community in an uproar. The energy signature was, well, it was unprecedented. It didn't match any known evolutionary pattern. Ash, are you feeling all right? The bio readings from your trainer watch showed a massive spike in your own energy output just before Larvitar evolved." Before Ash could formulate an answer, A sharp, polite knock echoed from the door. "Professor, can I call you back? Someone's here." He opened the door to find a man standing in the hallway. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit that seemed to absorb the light around it. His smile was polished and charming, but it didn't reach his eyes, which were the cold, calculating gray of a winter sky. He was the man from the stadium. "Ash Ketchum," the man said, his voice a smooth, cultured baritone. He extended a hand. "A pleasure. My name is Spectre. I'm with the Pokémon Advancement and Research Commission. May I have a moment of your time?" Warily, Ash let him in. Spectre's eyes swept the room, lingering for a fraction of a second on Pupitar before settling back on Ash. "Congratulations on your victory. It was, without a doubt, the most remarkable display of latent potential I have ever had the privilege of witnessing." "Thanks," Ash said, staying on his feet. He didn't trust this man's easy charm. "Park is a specialized organization," Spectre continued, his voice dropping to a more confidential tone. "We are funded by a consortium of the world's most forward-thinking leaders to explore the deepest mysteries of Pokémon. We seek to unlock the true potential that lies dormant within them, and by extension, within their trainers. What you did today, Mr. Ketchum, you didn't just win a battle, you opened a door." He moved closer, his voice a mesmerizing, persuasive hum. "We believe you have a unique, transcendent talent. A gift. Park can provide you with resources you can't even imagine. Laboratories, private training grounds, access to the rarest Pokémon on the planet. We can help you understand and control your power. We can make you the greatest Pokémon master in history. All we ask is that you join us. Work with us. Help us usher in a new era of Pokémon evolution." The offer hung in the air, shimmering and seductive. For a moment, Ash was tempted. Understanding this power, controlling it, it was a powerful lure. But then he looked at Pupitar. Then at Pikachu sleeping peacefully on his bed. His journey wasn't about labs or controlled experiments. It was about the wind in his face, the dirt on the road, the unpredictable, messy, beautiful process of growing stronger together, as a family. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Spectre," Ash said, his voice polite but firm. "But I'm not interested. My Pokémon and I, we have our own way of doing things." The change was instantaneous and chilling. The charming smile vanished from Spectre's face as if it had never been there. The warmth in his eyes froze over, replaced by a hard, metallic glint. He looked at Ash not as a potential prodigy, but as a faulty piece of equipment. "Our own way of doing things," he repeated, the words dripping with condescension. "You have no idea what you possess, do you? A power like that, left unguided, unregulated, it isn't a gift. It's a weapon of mass destruction in the hands of a child. It's a danger. To you, to your Pokémon, and to everyone around you." He took a step back toward the door, his posture radiating a quiet menace. "Accidents happen, Mr. Ketchum. Powerful trainers with unusual abilities sometimes attract the wrong kind of attention. Their Pokémon get hurt. It would be a tragedy for such a promising career to be cut short." He reached into his suit jacket and produced a sleek, black business card, placing it on the table. "The offer stands. For now. Think about what's best for you and for them." With a final, cold glance, he was gone, leaving a palpable chill in the room. Ash stood there for a long moment, his heart hammering against his ribs. The man's threat hung in the air, a poisonous vapor. He picked up the card. It was made of some kind of cold, smooth metal, bearing only a name, Spectre, and a complex symbol. When Misty and Brock returned, they found him pale and shaken. He recounted the entire conversation, the words tumbling out in a rush. Brock took the card from him, his eyes widening as he examined the symbol. "Park," Brock murmured, a note of dawning horror in his voice. "I've heard of them. They're a fringe research group, dismissed by the mainstream scientific community. They have radical theories about forcing Pokémon evolution, about genetic manipulation. They're considered extremists. Dangerous." The joy of the Silver Conference victory was now completely gone, turned to ash and swallowed by a cold, creeping dread. They weren't champions celebrating a hard-won triumph. They were a target. "We have to go," Misty said, her voice low and urgent. "Now, we can't stay here." As they began to hastily and quietly pack their bags, the television in the corner of the room, left on a 24-hour news channel, caught their attention. The screen showed chaotic aerial footage of a coastline. massive waves crashing against the shore under a strangely turbulent, green-tinged sky. Repeating our top story, the news anchor's voice said, grave and somber. A powerful, as yet unidentified Pokémon has caused a massive and anomalous energy surge in the coastal waters of the Hoenn region. The event has triggered freak weather patterns and geological instability. Experts are baffled by the scale of the energy readings, which rival that of a legendary Pokémon. Ash stared at the screen, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. The anchor mentioned strange atmospheric phenomena and unprecedented energy signatures. The words felt chillingly familiar. This wasn't a random event. He could feel it. It was connected, somehow, to Spectre, to Park, and to the terrifying power that was currently sleeping in a stone-gray shell on his windowsill. They didn't say another word. With a shared look of grim understanding, they shouldered their bags, recalled their Pokémon, and slipped out of the Pokémon Center into the dead of night. They were no longer on the path to the Pokémon League. They were fugitives, running from a shadow they didn't understand, into a future that had suddenly become terrifyingly uncertain. Chapter 2 End. The rain had been their only constant companion for 3 days. It fell in a relentless, gray sheet, turning the dirt tracks into sucking mud and plastering their clothes to their skin. They moved at night, avoiding the clean, well-lit Pokémon centers and the cheerful efficiency of the main roads. The joy of the Silver Conference victory had curdled into a metallic taste of fear in the back of their throats. Every distant headlight, every rustle in the tall grass, sent a jolt of adrenaline through them. Ash walked with his shoulders hunched against the rain, the collar of his jacket pulled up high. He was quieter than Misty or Brock had ever seen him. The vibrant, inexhaustible energy that was so core to his being had been banked, like a fire smothered to preserve its coals. He was listening to something no one else could hear, a faint, persistent hum on the edge of his perception. It wasn't a sound, but a feeling, a subtle vibration in the marrow of his bones that pulled insistently to the southeast, toward the Hoenn region. "We can't keep this up," Brock said, his voice a low rumble. He stopped under the meager shelter of an ancient, gnarled oak tree and pulled a map from his waterproof pack. The paper was already damp and warped. "We're running low on supplies, and our Pokémon need a proper rest. Pushing them like this is irresponsible." "What choice do we have?" Misty retorted, her voice sharp with exhaustion and worry. She wrung out her orange ponytail, a cascade of water running down her back. "You heard that man, Spectre. You saw his eyes. He's not going to just let us go. Every Pokémon Center is a trap. Every city is a risk." "She's right," Ash said, his voice quiet but firm. He looked at Brock, his eyes dark with a weariness that went beyond physical fatigue. "But you are too. We need a new plan. Running blindly won't work. They'll expect that." He took the map from Brock, his finger tracing a line down the coast. "Silver Town is here. They'll expect us to head for a major port like Olivine or Vermilion to get a ferry. It's the most logical move." Brock nodded. "And the easiest to intercept. They'll have eyes at every major terminal." "So we don't go to a major terminal," Ash continued, a flicker of his old strategic spark returning. He pointed to a smaller, unnamed dot on the coastline, nestled between two larger cities. "What's this?" Brock squinted at the map. "Ironcrest Port. It's not a passenger hub. Mostly cargo and shipping. It's dirty, industrial, and probably doesn't ask a lot of questions. It's a gamble, but it's a good one. Freighters from there go everywhere. We could find a ship heading to Hoenn, maybe find a captain willing to take on a few extra passengers for a price." The plan was set. It was a thin sliver of hope, but it was better than the aimless, paranoid flight they had been engaged in. They found shelter in an abandoned shepherd's hut for the day, rationing out their remaining food and letting their Pokémon stretch their legs. Ash sat with Bayleaf, her head resting comfortably in his lap. He gently stroked her long neck, feeling the reassuring warmth of her skin. He tried to focus, to reach out with that strange, new sense he felt, to connect with her on that deeper level he had touched with Larvitar. He closed his eyes, searching for the river of power, the silent, screaming will that had erupted in the stadium. He found nothing. There was only his bond with Bayleaf, a familiar and cherished connection forged through countless battles and shared moments of peace. It was strong, unwavering, but it was just friendship. There was no hidden reservoir of primal energy, no door waiting to be kicked open. A wave of frustration washed over him. Was it a fluke? A one-time event? Or did it only work when he was pushed to the absolute brink of desperation? You're thinking too hard. He opened his eyes. Misty was sitting down beside him, her expression soft. You're trying to force it, aren't you? Ash sighed, not bothering to deny it. I don't understand it, Misty. 1 minute, I have this impossible power. The next, it's gone. It's like a word on the tip of my tongue. I know it's there, but I can't grasp it. He looked down at his hands. Spectre was right. I am a child with something I don't understand. And it's putting you and Brock in danger. Stop that, Misty said, her voice firm but gentle. She nudged his shoulder. This isn't your fault. You didn't ask for this. And we're not in danger because of you. We're with you. There's a difference. That power, it didn't come from nowhere, Ash. It came from you. From your love for your Pokémon. It might be scary, but it's not evil. It's a part of you. Just like your ridiculous appetite and your inability to read a map. A small smile touched Ash's lips. Hey. It's true, she said, her own smile wavering slightly. Don't let them make you afraid of who you are, Ash. We'll figure this out, together. In the quiet of the hut, with the rain drumming a soft rhythm on the roof, her words were a balm. A quiet anchor in the storm of his confusion. He felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with any mysterious power, and everything to do with the girl sitting beside him. 2 days later, they arrived at Iron Crest Port. It was a place that had been stripped of all beauty and charm. The sky was a permanent, hazy gray from the smokestacks that clawed at the clouds. The air tasted of salt, rust, and diesel. The port was a sprawling maze of stacked shipping containers, towering cranes, and grimy warehouses. Men with hard faces and weary eyes shouted over the groan of machinery and the shriek of gulls. It was the perfect place to disappear. Brock, ever the pragmatist, handled the negotiations. He found a grizzled, sour-faced captain of a rust-bucket freighter called the Sea Serpent, bound for Slateport City in Hoenn. For a hefty sum of their remaining prize money, the captain agreed to look the other way as they slipped into an empty storage hold before departure at dawn. They were making their way through a narrow canyon of shipping containers, the path illuminated by the harsh, yellow glare of the dock lights, when a sudden, sharp hiss cut through the night. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into near-total darkness. The ambient noise of the port, the distant clang of metal, the hum of generators, was abruptly silenced. What was that? Misty whispered, her hand instinctively going to the Pokeball on her belt. A calm, amplified voice echoed through the metal canyon, seeming to come from everywhere at once. Ash Ketchum. A foolish choice to run. A futile one. Surrender yourself and the specimen, and your friends will be permitted to leave unharmed. Ash's blood ran cold. It wasn't Spectre's voice, but it had the same sterile, detached quality. He clicked a button on his Pokédex. Nothing. He tried his Pokeballs. The release mechanisms were dead, the familiar red light failing to glow. They're using a disruptor field, Brock breathed, his face grim in the gloom. It's blocking all local electronic signals. We can't call our Pokémon. 2 figures emerged from the shadows at the end of the alley, blocking their path to the sea. One was a tall, slender woman in a sleek, gray uniform, holding a complex-looking device that was likely the source of the field. The other was a mountain of a man, his bald head gleaming under the faint moonlight that pierced the clouds. He was cracking his knuckles, a cruel smile on his face. I am Cypher, the woman said, her voice the same amplified, emotionless tone. This is Raid. You will not be asked again. Pikachu, I'm sorry about this, buddy, Ash whispered. But I need you, Thunderbolt. Pikachu leapt from his shoulder, its cheeks sparking, but the resulting burst of electricity was a pathetic fizzle, a pale imitation of his usual power. The disruptor field was dampening that, too. Predictable, Cypher stated. Raid lumbered forward, and with a flick of his wrist, sent a specialized Pokeball spinning through the air. It was unaffected by the field. A massive Aggron emerged, its steel-plated body seeming to drink in the darkness. But there was something wrong with it. Its eyes glowed with a faint, unnatural purple light, and thin, almost invisible wires seemed to be threaded through the gaps in its armor, pulsing with the same sickly energy. That's a modified Pokémon, Brock said, horrified. That's against every regulation, it's barbaric. Park writes its own regulations, Cypher's voice echoed. Aggron, Metal Claw. The steel behemoth charged, its claws extended. Ash reacted on pure instinct. Pupitar, you're up. Use Harden. Pupitar, who had been traveling at Ash's feet, planted itself firmly on the ground. The Aggron's claw struck its shell with a deafening clang of metal on stone, sending sparks flying. Pupitar was thrown back, scraping along the asphalt, but its shell was unscratched. The battle was a desperate, one-sided affair. With Pikachu neutered and their other Pokémon trapped, they were hopelessly outmatched. Raid's Aggron was a relentless engine of destruction, its movements unnaturally fast, its power augmented by PARC's cruel technology. It slammed Pupitar into a container wall, the metal groaning and buckling under the force of the impact. Cypher deployed a squadron of small, hovering drones that fired sticky, containment foam, trapping Brock's feet and pinning Misty's arm to her side. They were being herded, corralled, their options being systematically stripped away. Ash watched as the Aggron raised its foot to bring it down on the struggling Pupitar. A familiar, hot surge of desperation and rage ripped through him. He felt it again, the silent scream, the river of power welling up inside him. He looked at Bayleaf's Pokeball on his belt, the release mechanism dead. But he didn't need the button. He felt he could reach past the technology, touch her spirit directly, and unleash a meganium that could shatter the entire dock. The power coiled in his gut, begging for release. He could end this, right now. But then, he saw Bayleaf's face in his mind's eye, her trusting, affectionate gaze. He heard Misty's voice in the quiet of the hut. Don't let them make you afraid of who you are. This power was a part of him, yes. But if he used it like this, to force his will upon his friends, to twist them into weapons just like Park had done to their Aggron, what was the difference between him and them? He made a choice. The surge of power receded, not vanishing, but settling, brought under his conscious control with a will of iron he didn't know he possessed. He would not become the monster they wanted him to be. Brock. The fuel canisters. Ash yelled, pointing to a stack of red barrels at the side of the alley. Can you get to them? Brock, seeing Ash's intent, grinned fiercely. He pulled a small geologist's pick from his belt and, ignoring the foam on his boots, hurled it with all his strength. It struck one of the drones, sending it spinning into Cypher's disruptor device. The device sparked and short-circuited with a loud pop. Instantly, the dock lights flickered back on, and the hum of the port returned. Staryu, go! Misty shouted, her Pokeball now working. Her Pokémon materialized and, with a sharp command, fired a concentrated water gun, not at the Aggron, but at Cypher, drenching her and her remaining technology. My turn! Ash yelled, his confidence roaring back. Pikachu, full power. Thunderbolt on the Aggron. Now unimpeded, Pikachu unleashed a massive, brilliant bolt of lightning that slammed into the steel Pokémon, causing it to cry out in pain and stagger back. But the battle wasn't over. Raid roared in frustration, and the purple light in Aggron's eyes intensified. It shook off the electricity and charged again, more furious than before. It was Pupitar who ended it. It had pushed itself up, its red eyes no longer calm, but blazing with a cold, focused fury. It didn't wait for a command. It stomped its small, hard body on the ground and unleashed a sandstorm. But this was no ordinary weather effect. The sand and grit that swirled into a vortex around it seemed to be made of razor blades and shadow, a tactical, terrifying display of power. It didn't spread wildly. It converged on the Aggron, blinding it, tearing at the wires in its armor, and creating a perfect, swirling screen of chaos. Now's our chance. Let's go, Ash yelled. They didn't wait to see the outcome. They sprinted through the swirling sand, leaving the disoriented park agents behind. They scrambled up the gangplank of the Sea Serpent just as the grizzled captain was shouting the order to cast off. They slipped down into the dark, cavernous cargo hold, the heavy metal door sliding shut above them, plunging them into a darkness that felt, for the first time in days, like safety. The deep groan of the ship's engines vibrated through the floor as it pulled away from the port. They were fugitives, adrift on the open sea, heading toward a danger they couldn't comprehend. Ash leaned against the cold steel wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked at his hands, feeling the phantom ache of the immense power he had consciously chosen to suppress. He had won without it. He had kept his soul intact. But as the ship moved further out to sea, the faint, distant hum from Hoenn grew stronger, clearer. It was no longer a whisper. It was a siren call, pulling them toward the heart of the storm. Chapter 3 End. The darkness of the cargo hold was a thick, living thing. It smelled of brine, rust, and the faint, greasy scent of diesel. The only sounds were the constant, deep-throated groan of the sea serpent's engines and the rhythmic slosh of the ocean against the steel hull. For the first few hours, it felt like a sanctuary. Now, it was beginning to feel like a cage. They had found a small pocket of space between a towering stack of crates labeled industrial lubricants and a pallet of what smelled suspiciously like pickled vegetables. Brock had produced a small, battery-powered lantern from his seemingly bottomless pack, casting a pool of weak, yellow light that pushed the oppressive darkness back a few feet, creating a fragile island of civilization in the vast, metallic cavern. Pikachu was curled in Ash's lap, his fur still damp, giving off a faint scent of ozone. Pupitar sat nearby, a stoic, unmoving sentinel in the gloom, its inner eyes glowing with a soft, reassuring light. "They knew we'd be there," Misty said, breaking the long silence. She was hugging her knees to her chest, her voice a low, troubled murmur. "They were waiting for us. How could they have known?" "A tracker," Brock surmised, his practical mind already dissecting the problem. "They must have planted one on us during the battle. On our clothes, our packs, it could be anywhere." He immediately began patting down his own vest, a frown creasing his features. "We need to find it." Ash wasn't listening. He was staring at the steel wall, but his focus was turned inward. He could still feel the phantom sensation of that immense power coiling in his gut, a caged sun begging to be unleashed. He had held it back. He had looked into the abyss of what he could do, force Bayleaf's evolution, turn her into a weapon just as Park had done to their Aggron, and he had chosen to turn away. The choice had left him feeling hollowed out, but also strangely whole. "I could have stopped them," he said quietly, the words dropping into the space between them. "Back there, in the port. I could have ended it." Misty and Brock stopped their search and looked at him. "I felt it again," Ash continued, his gaze distant. "The same thing that happened with Larvitar. I could have made Bayleaf evolve. All of her, right there. Meganium. I know I could have." The admission hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. Brock's expression was grim. "Ash, to force an evolution like that, the strain on a Pokemon's body, on its mind." "I know," Ash cut in, his voice tight. "That's why I didn't. They were using that Aggron like a machine, twisting it into something it wasn't supposed to be. If I had used my power like that, I'd be just like them." He finally looked at his friends, his eyes pleading for understanding. "It was the right choice, wasn't it?" Misty moved closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was warm, steady. "It was the only choice, Ash," she said softly. "Being strong isn't about having the most power. It's about knowing when not to use it." A sudden, loud clang from above made them all jump. Heavy footsteps echoed on the metal deck, followed by the grinding sound of the cargo hold door being unlatched. A rectangle of blinding daylight flooded their hiding spot, silhouetting a large, imposing figure. Well, a gravelly voice boomed, echoing through the hold. "Looks like I've got rats. And I didn't even charge for the extra passage." The captain of the Sea Serpent stood there, a mountain of a man with a wild, gray beard and a scowl that looked like it had been permanently etched onto his face by years of sea salt and disappointment. They were caught. They stood, hands half raised, caught in the beam of the captain's glare, but before he could continue, a faint, high-pitched whine began to emanate from Ash's backpack. The captain's eyes narrowed, his gaze flicking to the bag. With a sinking feeling, Ash opened the pack. Tucked into an inner pocket was a small, metallic disc, no bigger than a coin, blinking with a tiny red light. A park tracker. "Right," the captain grunted, his expression shifting from annoyed to dangerously serious. "So you're not just freeloaders. You're trouble." He looked from the tracker to their tense faces, then spat over the side of the open hatch. "I hate trouble. But I hate corporate jackals in fancy uniforms even more." He jabbed a thick finger at the tracker. "Is that who I think it is? The types who think they own the sea because they have the shiniest boats?" Brock nodded slowly. "Something like that. They're called Park." The captain let out a short, harsh laugh. "Park. Heard of him. Bunch of fanatics. Saw one of their science vessels bully a pod of Whalmer last season. Had a run-in with one of their patrol cutters myself." He looked out at the horizon, his eyes scanning the endless blue. "That thing's a beacon. They're coming for you, which means they're coming for my ship." He crushed the tracker under his heavy boot, the blinking light dying with a faint crunch. Get topside. All of you. If there's gonna be a fight for my ship, you're damn well gonna be in it. And you owe me for the trouble. Big time. The deck of the Sea Serpent was a chaotic landscape of rust, coiled ropes, and machinery. The sea air was fresh and clean after the stale confines of the hold, but any relief was short-lived. Far behind them, a black speck on the horizon was rapidly growing larger. There they are, the captain, who introduced himself only as Silas, growled. The Harbinger, PARC's new pursuit vessel. Faster than anything has a right to be. It looked less like a ship and more like a predator, a sleek, black wedge cutting through the waves with unnatural speed, leaving barely a wake behind it. As it drew closer, they could see Cypher and Raid standing on its deck, looking as calm and menacing as they had in the port. They won't hail us, Silas said, his hand resting on the ship's telegraph. They'll disable us, board us, and take what they want. Standard procedure for bullies. We can't outrun them, Brock stated, the tactical part of his brain taking over. We'll have to fight. Ash, your water Pokémon are our best bet here. Ash nodded, his mind racing. This was different from the alley. This was an open battlefield, and they were on a slower, less maneuverable vessel. Totodile, Corphish, you're up. His two Pokémon materialized on the deck, chirping and clacking their claws with enthusiasm. Misty, we need cover. Ash yelled over the rising wind. Staryu, Gyarados, let's go. Misty summoned her own powerful team, the mighty Sea Serpent and the Geometric Star Pokémon hitting the water with a splash. The Harbinger was now close enough for them to see the weapons ports opening on its bow. They're going to fire. Silas roared. Brace yourselves. A volley of energy torpedoes shot across the water. Gyarados, use hydropump, Misty commanded. Her Gyarados reared its head from the ocean and unleashed a colossal jet of water, a liquid battering ram that met the torpedoes head-on. The resulting explosion sent a massive plume of steam and water into the air, drenching the Sea Serpent's deck. The battle was joined. Cypher and Raid deployed a new wave of technology, aquatic drones that zipped under the water, firing nets and sonic pulses. Raid sent out a vicious, wire-augmented Crawdont, its eyes glowing with the same sickly purple light as the Aggron. Ash's Corphish met the Crawdont head-on, a furious clash of claws and shells on the surface of the water. Totodile and Staryu worked together, a whirlwind of bubble beam and water gun attacks that took down the swarming drones. But PARC's resources were overwhelming. The Harbinger fired a magnetic pulse that caused the Sea Serpent's engines to sputter and die, leaving them dead in the water. Grappling lines shot from the pursuit vessel, biting into the freighter's hull, pulling the two ships closer together. They're going to board us, Brock yelled, sending out his Lombre to provide support. Ash felt a growing sense of dread. They were being systematically dismantled, their best efforts only delaying the inevitable. The hum he felt from Hoenn was stronger now, a persistent, throbbing ache behind his eyes. It wasn't a call for help anymore, it was a scream of agony. He closed his eyes for a second, and a terrifying image flashed through his mind. A colossal, whale-like eye, clouded with pain. A network of purple energy constricting a giant, beating heart. Kyogre. They were doing something to Kyogre. Raid and a team of park commandos leapt from the Harbinger to the Sea Serpent's deck. Brock's Lombre and Misty's Staryu moved to intercept, but they were quickly overwhelmed by the sheer numbers and advanced technology. It was happening again. They were losing. Desperation, cold and sharp, clawed at Ash's throat. He looked at his Tailo, circling high above the battle, too small to engage the heavily armed soldiers. The familiar, searing heat of the power began to build inside him. This time, it felt different. He wasn't just screaming into the void. He was reaching for a specific tool. He remembered his choice in the port. He wouldn't force an evolution. He wouldn't twist his Pokémon into something they weren't. But what if he just amplified what was already there? He focused on Tailo, on its natural, incredible speed. He poured the energy not into its body, not into its form, but into the very concept of its flight. Faster, he willed. The single word a razor-sharp point of focus. Be faster than they can see. High above, Tailo let out a sharp cry. A shimmering, silver aura, like heat haze on a summer road, flared around its body. It didn't evolve. It didn't change. It just accelerated. It broke the sound barrier with a sharp crack that echoed across the ocean, a tiny, feathered missile moving at an impossible velocity. It became a blur, a living silver streak in the sky. "Talo, the Harbinger's main cannon," Ash commanded, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining the power surge. The commandos on the deck didn't even have time to react. The silver blur that was Talo Dove. It weaved through their ranks, creating a miniature sonic boom that sent the soldiers sprawling. It wasn't attacking them, just moving past them with such force that the displaced air became a weapon. It reached the Harbinger and, with a precision that defied its speed, used its beak to strike a critical power conduit on the side of the main cannon. The cannon sparked violently and exploded, peeling back the bow of the Park ship in a shower of molten metal. The effect on Ash was immediate and devastating. The moment Talo completed the task, the power receded, leaving him gasping, dizzy, and profoundly weak. He stumbled and fell to one knee, the world spinning around him. The explosion had thrown the Park team into chaos. Cypher, her cold composure finally broken, screamed orders into her comm. The grappling lines were retracted as her crew scrambled to deal with the damage. "Now's my chance," Silas roared, seeing his opportunity. He had been working frantically on the engines and, with a final, desperate prayer to the sea gods, they coughed back to life with a belch of black smoke. He slammed the telegraph to full ahead. The sea serpent, wounded but alive, began to pull away from the crippled Harbinger. But their victory was short-lived. The explosion on the Park vessel had damaged the sea serpent as well. A deep, groaning tear had been ripped in its hull near the waterline. Alarms began to blare as water flooded the lower decks. "She's going down," Silas yelled, his face a mask of grim resignation. Everyone abandoned ship. There was no time for lifeboats. Misty's Gyarados became their ark, the trio and the old captain scrambling onto its broad, blue back as the sea serpent listed heavily, its deck slipping beneath the waves. They watched as the ship that had been their sanctuary sank into the depths, a final hiss of steam marking its grave. They were alive. They were free. But they were adrift in the middle of the ocean, with a crippled but still dangerous enemy behind them and the source of a terrifying power somewhere ahead. As Gyarados swam steadily toward the distant smudge of the Hoenn coastline, Ash lay collapsed on its back, every muscle aching. He had controlled his power. He had used it with focus and precision, and the effort had nearly broken him. The scream from Hoenn was louder than ever, and now he knew, with chilling certainty, that he was the only one who could answer it. Chapter 4 End. The world was a blur of aching blue and searing white. Ash drifted in a sea of exhaustion, the rhythmic rise and fall of Gyarados' massive coils the only thing tethering him to reality. Salt spray misted his face, stinging the raw weariness in his eyes. The power he had channeled through Talo had left a void in its wake, a bone-deep hollowness that felt like he'd given away a piece of his own soul. His mind was a chaotic slideshow of images, Talo, wreathed in a silver aura of impossible speed. The flash of the explosion on the Harbinger's deck, and beneath it all, a persistent, terrifying vision. A colossal eye, the size of a small island, clouded with a pain so profound it was a physical force. He saw networks of sickly purple energy, like diseased veins, constricting a giant, slowly beating heart. Kyogre, the name was a silent scream in his mind, a constant thrum of agony that resonated with the emptiness inside him. "Ash, Ash, can you hear me?" Misty's voice cut through the haze. He felt a cool hand on his forehead. He blinked, the world slowly coming into focus. He was lying on Gyarados' back, his head pillowed on his own backpack. Misty was kneeling over him, her face etched with worry. Brock and Silas were a few feet away, scanning the horizon. "I'm okay," he managed, his voice a dry rasp. He pushed himself into a sitting position, the effort making his head swim. "How long was I out?" "A few hours," Brock said, turning to look at him. His usual calm was strained. "You were completely drained. Whatever you did back there, Ash, it took a serious toll." Silas grunted, his gaze fixed on the endless expanse of water. "Whatever he did, he saved our hides. The kid's got more to him than meets the eye. But it won't matter if we don't find land soon. Even a Gyarados can't swim forever, and we're out of fresh water." As if summoned by his words, Pikachu, perched on Gyarados' head, let out an excited cry, pointing a small paw forward. "Pika Pie." On the horizon, a smudge of deep green had appeared. Land. The sight sent a surge of relief through them so powerful it was almost as draining as the battle itself. Hope was a heavy burden when you had so little of it left. It took them the rest of the day to reach the shore. It wasn't the pristine beach of a tourist brochure, but a rugged, wild coastline of black volcanic rock and dense, unfamiliar jungle that seemed to press right up to the water's edge. A small, natural cove offered a pocket of calm water, and they guided Gyarados into the shallows, sliding off its back onto the blessed, unmoving stability of solid ground. They found shelter in the ruins of a small, abandoned fishing village. The wooden shacks were collapsing, draped in thick vines and worn smooth by years of sea wind, but one of them still had a mostly intact roof. It was damp and smelled of decay and old salt, but it was shelter. While Brock tried to get a small, smokeless fire going with some damp driftwood and Misty took the Pokémon to a freshwater stream she had found, Silas sat on an overturned boat, staring back out at the sea. "They'll be back," the old captain said to Ash, who had collapsed against the wall of the shack. "People like that don't give up. They'll patch up their ship, or call in another one. They have you scented. They'll hunt you to the ends of the earth." "I know," Ash said quietly. The thrumming pain from Kyogre was stronger here, a nauseating, pulsing beat that vibrated up from the very rock beneath them. They were close. "So what's the plan, kid?" Silas asked, his voice unexpectedly serious. "You've got a power that corporate armies want, you're on the run with your friends, and you look like you're about to fall apart. What's the next move?" Ash didn't have an answer. He was just a trainer. A champion, yes, but this was beyond anything he had ever faced. This wasn't a battle for a badge or a trophy. It was a war against a faceless, relentless enemy, for stakes he didn't even understand. "You are not just a trainer, Ash Ketchum." The voice was calm and deep, seeming to come from the shadows of the encroaching jungle. A man emerged, stepping into the dim twilight of the cove. He was old, his face a roadmap of wrinkles carved by sun and sea, his white hair tied back in a simple knot. He wore the simple clothes of a fisherman, but he moved with a quiet grace that spoke of immense, contained power. His eyes, a startlingly clear blue, seemed to see right through Ash, into the hollow space the power had left behind. Instinctively, Ash scrambled to his feet. Pikachu leapt to his shoulder, its cheeks sparking defensively. Silas stood up, his hand reaching for a gaff hook that was never far from his side. "Who are you?" Ash demanded, his voice shaky. "My name is Arian," the man said, his gaze never leaving Ash. "And I am an observer. I was drawn here by the imbalance. The scream of the sea incarnate, and the echo of the catalyst who answered it." He looked directly at Ash. "I am talking about Kyogre, and I am talking about you." Misty and Brock returned at a run, drawn by the new voice. They took up defensive positions around Ash, their expressions wary. "We don't want any trouble," Brock said, his stance solid and unyielding. "I am not here to cause trouble," Arian said, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to their tension. He gestured towards the interior of the island. "I am here to offer guidance. What is happening to Kyogre is not merely the work of the men who hunt you. They're parasites, opportunists feeding on a much deeper wound." He walked closer, his blue eyes holding a profound sadness. "A foreign energy, a shadow resonance, has infected Kyogre. It is a poison to its spirit, driving it into a state of primal madness and agony. This is what is causing the freak weather patterns, the geological instability you heard about on the news. Park did not cause this. But they are attempting to harness it. They seek to use a maddened god as a weapon." The pieces clicked into place in Ash's mind. The purple energy, the wires, the augmented Pokémon, Park wasn't just controlling them, they were channeling this shadow resonance into them. "Can you help it?" Ash asked, the question raw and desperate. "Can you stop it?" "I alone cannot," Arian said. "My role is to observe, to maintain the balance where I can. But to intervene directly in a matter of this scale, it is not my purpose. Your power, however, is different. It is a power of catalysis, of becoming. It does not observe, it acts. You could, perhaps, touch Kyogre's spirit. You could force the poison out, trigger a purification." A sliver of hope, sharp and dangerous, pierced through Ash's exhaustion. "You mean, I could make it evolve? Like Larvitar?" Arian's expression became grave. "That is a child's understanding of a cosmic force. What you did with your Larvitar was like lighting a match in a cave. What you are contemplating with Kyogre is detonating a sun to channel your power into a legendary Pokémon, one already unstable and in immense pain. The feedback could shatter your mind. The energy release could vaporize this entire island. You might save Kyogre, or you might become the epicenter of a cataclysm that will make the current weather anomalies look like a spring shower. The hope turned to ice in Ash's stomach. He had the power to save Kyogre, but the cost of trying could be everything. Aboard the crippled, smoking deck of the Harbinger, the atmosphere was one of cold, efficient fury. Cypher and Raid stood at attention before a massive holographic screen, from which the face of a man even more severe than Spectre regarded them. His features were sharp, aristocratic, and utterly devoid of emotion. "Report," the man commanded. "Subject Ash Ketchum has escaped, Director," Cypher said, her voice betraying no hint of fear. He demonstrated a new application of his ability. He did not trigger a full evolutionary change, but a temporary, focused amplification of a single trait. In this case, his Talos velocity. The energy signature was refined, controlled. The director's cold eyes narrowed slightly. He is learning. Evolving. This accelerates our timeline. Spectre's initial assessment was that the boy was an unconscious catalyst. He is becoming a conscious wielder. A far more dangerous and valuable asset. "We believe he is heading for the focal point of the Kyogre anomaly," Raid added, his deep voice a low growl. "He must not be allowed to make contact," the director stated, his voice dropping to a near whisper, a tone far more terrifying than any shout. "If his catalytic energy merges with the corrupted resonance flowing from the anomaly, the reaction would be unpredictable. We would lose control of the situation entirely." He looked past them, as if at a technician just off-screen. "The Chimera units are ready?" "Yes, Director," came a disembodied voice. The director's gaze returned to Cypher. "Deploy them. Your new objective is not capture. It is containment. Use any means necessary to stop Ash Ketchum from reaching the heart of this island. Do not let him near the Abyssal Shrine. Do you understand?" "Perfectly, Director," Cypher said with a slight, cold bow. The hologram vanished, leaving them on the deck of their broken ship. Cypher turned to Raid, a cruel, thin smile touching her lips for the first time. "The director has finally let us off the leash," she said. "Prepare the chimeras. It's time we showed the boy what a real monster looks like." Back in the ruined shack, the weight of Arian's warning settled over them. Misty stood close to Ash, her fear for him a palpable thing. Brock was pacing, analyzing the tactical impossibilities. Silas just watched Ash, his cynical eyes holding a new, grudging respect. "He's telling you it's suicide, Ash," Misty said, her voice tight. "You almost passed out just from helping Talo. Doing that to a legendary, it will kill you." "If we do nothing, Kyogre could tear the whole region apart," Brock countered, his pragmatism at war with his concern for his friend. "Or Park will succeed in controlling it, and then what? A mad god as their personal weapon." They all looked at Ash. It was his power, his choice, his life on the line. He closed his eyes, shutting out their worried faces, the crumbling shack, everything. He focused on the thrumming pain, the psychic scream that had pulled him across the sea. He had run from Spectre, he had fought off Cypher and Raid, but he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that he hadn't been running from them. He had been running to this. To Kyogre. This was his battle to fight. He opened his eyes, and the weariness was gone, replaced by the familiar, stubborn fire his friends knew so well. It was the same look he'd had before facing Harrison's Blaziken, the same look he'd had 100 times before in the face of impossible odds. "I have to try," he said, his voice quiet but unshakable. "I can't stand by and let a Pokémon suffer like that. It's not who I am." He looked at Arian. "Where is it? Where do I have to go?" Arian nodded slowly, a look of profound, sad understanding in his ancient blue eyes. "The source of the resonance is in the Abyssal Shrine, deep in the heart of the island's central volcano. I will guide you to the path." He turned and began to walk toward the jungle. "But know this. The path is dangerous. And the men who hunt you will not be the only monsters you face." Ash, with Pikachu on his shoulder and his friends and a cynical old sea captain at his back, took a deep breath of the humid, volcanic air and followed the old man into the shadows of the jungle. He was walking toward the heart of the storm, ready to face the sun. Chapter 5 End. The jungle was alive, and it was angry. It wasn't the clean, vibrant wilderness Ash was used to. This was a place of deep, suffocating greens and dark, rotting browns. The air was thick and heavy, a humid blanket that clung to their skin and made every breath a conscious effort. The path Arian led them on was barely a path at all, a winding, half-overgrown track that seemed to fight their every step. Thorny vines, unnaturally sharp and aggressive, snagged at their clothes, while unseen things skittered in the dense undergrowth just beyond the edge of their vision. The Pokémon were the worst part. They were there, in the rustling canopy and the dark shadows between ancient, moss-covered trees, but they were silent. Not the peaceful silence of a healthy forest, but a tense, coiled silence, the kind that comes before a violent storm. A flock of Talo, which should have been chattering and playful, watched them pass with cold, predatory eyes. A lone Breloom, spotted half hidden behind a giant fern, didn't perform its usual bouncy, curious dance. It simply stood its ground, its fists clenched, its gaze a silent, hostile warning. "The resonance is bleeding out from the shrine," Arian explained, his voice a low, calm counterpoint to the jungle's oppressive tension. He moved through the undergrowth with an ease that belied his age, his simple sandals making almost no sound on the damp earth. Kyogre's pain is poisoning the land itself. It agitates the wild Pokémon, twisting their instincts, turning territorial defensiveness into mindless aggression. Be on your guard. Ash didn't need the warning. He could feel it. The psychic scream from the island's heart was a constant, grinding pressure behind his eyes. It was a struggle to focus, to separate the agonized cries of the legendary from the immediate, tangible threats of the jungle around them. He walked in a bubble of concentration, his hand resting on Pikachu's head, the familiar, steady warmth of his partner a vital anchor in the swirling chaos of his mind. "I'd take a hurricane on the open sea over this thrice-damned greenhouse any day," Silas grumbled from the rear of the group. He was sweating profusely, his heavy sea coat now tied around his waist, his face a mask of weary disgust. "At least on the water, you can see what's coming to kill you." "He's got a point," Misty whispered, moving closer to Ash. "This place feels wrong. Are you okay? You've been quiet." Ash gave her a tired smile, grateful for the concern in her eyes. "Just trying to tune it out. It's loud in my head right now." "Then let us be your eyes and ears," she said, her voice fierce and protective. She drew a Pokeball from her belt, the familiar weight a small comfort. "We'll handle the outside. You just focus on not letting the inside tear you apart." Their journey was punctuated by short, sharp bursts of conflict. A territorial Ursaring, its eyes glowing with a faint, sickly purple tinge, burst from the trees, roaring its fury. Brock, ever prepared, met its charge with his golem, the battle a brutal but brief clash of rock and claw that ended with the great bear retreating back into the shadows, more confused than truly defeated. Later, a swarm of Beedrill, their stingers dripping with a venom that looked unnaturally dark, descended upon them, forcing Misty's Staryu to drive them back with a spinning, high-pressure water gun. These weren't battles of sport or strategy, they were desperate, messy skirmishes for survival. As the sun began to dip below the canopy, casting long, distorted shadows that made the jungle even more menacing, they came to a chasm. A deep, ugly scar in the earth, it was hundreds of feet deep, the sound of a rushing river echoing from its unseen depths. A single, rickety rope bridge, ancient and frayed, was their only way across. "The path to the volcano lies on the other side," Arian said, his calm unwavering. "The bridge is older than any living memory, but it will hold. Walk one at a time. Keep your movements smooth." Brock went first, testing each wooden slat with a careful, practiced step. He made it across without incident, giving them a thumbs up from the other side. Misty followed, her natural grace making the perilous crossing look easy. Silas, muttering a string of colorful curses about the sea, the land, and everything in between, shuffled his way over next. It was Ash's turn. He took a deep breath, Pikachu clinging tightly to his shoulder, and stepped onto the bridge. The ropes groaned under his weight, and the whole structure swayed in the wind that gusted up from the chasm. He kept his eyes fixed on Brock and Misty, their reassuring faces a beacon on the far side. He was halfway across when a sudden, high-frequency sound, almost too high for the human ear to register, pierced the air. It was followed by a chorus of howls. From the cliffs on both sides of the chasm, a pack of Mightyena emerged from the shadows. Their fur was matted, their teeth bared in a permanent snarl. and their eyes glowed with the same malevolent purple as the Ursaring's. But these weren't just agitated. They were being driven, commanded. Ash saw them then, small, black discs attached to the cliffs, the source of the high-pitched sound, pulsing with a faint light. Park. It was a trap. The mighty Enna didn't attack them. They launched themselves at the thick anchor ropes holding the bridge to the cliffs. Their powerful jaws tore at the ancient fibers, snapping them one by one. Ash, get back! Brock yelled in panic. But there was no time. With a series of sickening pops, the ropes on the far side gave way. The bridge didn't fall. It swung violently downward, a pendulum of wood and rope, slamming Ash into the cliff face with bone-jarring force. He clung on for dear life, the wind knocked out of him, Pikachu shrieking in alarm. Below him was a dizzying, terrifying drop into darkness. "We're cut off," Misty screamed, her face a pale mask of horror. From the jungle behind Ash, on his side of the chasm, a new sound emerged. It wasn't the howl of a Pokémon or the familiar hum of technology. It was a wet, tearing sound, followed by a heavy, rhythmic stomping that shook the very ground. A tree, as thick as a house, was thrown aside as if it were a twig. What stepped into the clearing was a nightmare. It was an abomination, a monstrous fusion of 3 different Pokémon, stitched together with glowing purple wires and crude, bolted metal plates. Its main body was the armored torso of an Aggron, a walking fortress of scarred, dark steel. But instead of legs, it had the powerful, digitigrade limbs of a Zangoose, giving it a terrifying, unnatural speed. And where its right arm should have been, there was the long, segmented, venom-dripping tail of a Drapion, ending in a pair of vicious, snapping claws. Its single, central eye was a park camera lens, glowing with a cold, red, analytical light. The creature let out a sound that was a dissonant, horrifying chorus of 3 separate roars, twisted into one. "By the gods!" Silas breathed from the other side of the chasm. "What is that thing?" "A chimera," Arian said, his voice grim, the first crack in his serene composure. "Park's ultimate perversion. Life without a soul. A weapon grown in a lab." The chimera's red eye fixed on Ash, who was still dangling helplessly from the remains of the bridge. The Drapion clawtail shot out, not to attack, but to sever the final ropes holding him. The bridge gave way completely. Ash fell. For a heart-stopping second, he was in freefall. Then, something small and incredibly fast shot past him, a silver blur. "Tailo, use quick attack," Ash roared. The command ripped from his throat by instinct. He didn't have time to channel his power, but Tailo didn't need it. It dove under him, and Ash managed to grab onto its small, impossibly strong legs. His fall was arrested, his descent slowed, but Tailo was too small to carry his full weight back up. It could only guide his fall, straining with all its might to steer him towards a narrow ledge 100 feet down. They hit the ledge hard. Ash cried out as his shoulder impacted the rock, but he was alive. He was trapped, separated from his friends, with a monster above and a seemingly bottomless pit below. The chimera, its primary target now out of immediate reach, turned its attention to Arian, who was now alone on its side of the chasm. "Run, old man!" Silas yelled. But Arian stood his ground. He held up a hand, and a shimmering barrier of psychic energy flared to life in front of him. "Your fight is not with me, abomination," he said, his voice resonating with a strange power. The chimera charged, its Zangoose legs carrying its Aggron body forward at a terrifying speed. It slammed into the barrier, which cracked like glass but held. The monster was relentless, hammering at the shield with its free claw and its venomous tail. "We have to help him," Misty cried, her panic rising. "Gyarados, can you reach?" Her mightiest Pokémon was trapped in its ball, useless without a body of water. Down on the ledge, Ash pushed himself up, his mind racing. He was too far away to battle effectively. He looked at his Pokéballs. Golem was too heavy. Bayleaf couldn't maneuver here. But Pupitar was dense, solid. An idea, desperate and insane, sparked in his mind. "Arian, drop the shield." "I have a plan," Ash yelled, his voice echoing up the chasm walls. Arian glanced down, saw the desperate resolve in Ash's eyes, and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He dropped the psychic barrier. The chimera, its path now clear, reared back its Drapion tail, the claws dripping with a dark, sizzling venom, ready to strike the old man down. Pupitar, I need you. Now, Ash roared, throwing the Pokeball not onto the ledge with him, but upward, over the chasm. As it reached the apex of its arc, it burst open. Pupitar materialized in midair, right in the Chimera's path. Harden! Ash screamed, and as he gave the command, he closed his eyes and pushed. This time, it wasn't a scream of desperation. It was a focused, concentrated act of will. He didn't try to evolve Pupitar. He didn't try to amplify its speed or its power. He took the very concept of its durability, its inherent, unyielding toughness, and poured his energy into it like molten steel into a mold. He willed it to become absolute. Unbreakable, he thought, the word a pillar of solid iron in his mind. A deep, resonant hum, almost inaudible, emanated from Pupitar. The gray of its shell deepened, becoming the color of polished obsidian. It didn't glow or shimmer. It just became more solid, more real. The very air around it seemed to thicken. The Chimera's venomous claws struck Pupitar's shell. The resulting sound was not a clang of metal or a crack of stone. It was a deafening, final thud, like the sound of a mountain being struck by a meteor. The Chimera's Drapion claws, which could likely punch through a bank vault, shattered into 1,000 pieces against Pupitar's amplified shell. The monster let out a screech of pure agony and confusion, stumbling back, its primary weapon destroyed. The feedback hit Ash like a physical blow. It wasn't the draining emptiness of the Talo surge. It was a crushing weight, a profound, heavy ache that made his bones feel like lead. He gritted his teeth, sweat pouring down his face, holding the power steady. Pupitar, suspended in midair by the sheer force of the Chimera's blow, was now falling. Brock. Now. Ash gasped out. Brock had already seen the opening. Golem, use rollout, aim for its legs. From the far cliff, Golem curled into a ball and launched itself across the chasm, a hurtling boulder of pure power. It slammed into the Chimera's Zangoose legs, buckling them and sending the monster crashing to the ground with a titanic shudder. Misty. Politoed, water gun. At the exposed wiring on its back, Misty commanded, seeing the weak point Brock's attack had revealed. A bundle of glowing purple cables where the Aggron torso met the Zangoose limbs. A precise, high-pressure jet of water struck the damaged wiring. There was a massive shower of sparks, a shriek of short-circuiting electronics, and the Chimera's red eye flickered and died. The abomination lay still, smoke pouring from its ruined chassis. As the monster fell, the power receded from Ash. He collapsed onto the ledge, his body trembling, every muscle screaming in protest. Pupitar landed safely in the jungle next to Orion, its shell returning to its normal gray, seemingly unharmed. High above, on the cliff edge, two figures watched the scene dispassionately. Cypher lowered a pair of electro-binoculars, a thin, analytical smile on her face. Remarkable, she said to Raid, who stood beside her, his massive arms crossed. He's learning to modulate. A defensive amplification. The energy cost appears to be heavy, but sustainable. The catalyst is adapting faster than the director predicted. Chimera Unit 01 has been neutralized, Raid rumbled, a note of displeasure in his voice. It served its purpose, Cypher countered, her voice cold. It provided us with invaluable combat data. Now we have a baseline. She turned away from the chasm. Let the island's natural guardians wear him down further. We will deploy Unit 02 at the base of the volcano. It will be calibrated accordingly. They melted back into the shadows, leaving only the wreckage of their monster behind. Down below, Ash looked up at the impossible distance separating him from his friends. They had won. They had survived. But he was trapped, weakened, and the psychic scream of Kyogre was getting louder, closer, pulling him deeper into the heart of the poisoned island. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Whispering Wound. The world was a vertical sheet of black rock and the distant, mocking stars above. Ash lay on the narrow ledge, every muscle a taut wire of agony. The crushing weight of the power he'd channeled into Pupitar had settled deep in his bones. A profound ache that felt less like an injury and more like a fundamental part of his structure had been compressed. His shoulder throbbed where he'd hit the cliff face, a sharp counterpoint to the dull, grinding psychic pressure emanating from the island's heart. Kyogre's scream was no longer a distant hum. It was a voice in his head. It didn't speak in words, but in raw, primal emotion, pain, confusion, and a rage so deep it felt ancient. The emotions were so overwhelming, so vast, that his own feelings were like a tiny boat caught in a hurricane. He gritted his teeth, sweat and grime plastering his hair to his forehead, fighting to keep his own identity from being washed away in the tide of the legendary's suffering. Ash, can you hear me? Are you hurt? Brock's voice echoed from above, distorted and distant. Ash pushed himself up, his vision swimming. I'm okay, he yelled back, the effort sending a fresh wave of dizziness through him. The ledge is stable. Can you climb? Misty shouted, her voice tight with a fear she was failing to conceal. He looked up. The cliff face was sheer, offering no handholds. He looked down into the blackness that had swallowed the chasm. There was no way out. He was stranded. He saw the small, anxious faces of his friends peering down from the opposite cliff, their forms silhouetted against the darkening sky. They were whirled away. For the first time on this desperate flight, he felt truly, utterly alone. The pain in his head intensified, and for a terrifying second, the rock beneath him seemed to ripple, to become liquid like the ocean. He shook his head, driving the illusion away. He couldn't let it break him. He wasn't alone. He had his team. His hand went to his belt. He was weak, his energy reserves scraped clean, but his Pokémon were not. He didn't need some cosmic, reality-bending power for this. He just needed a friend. Noctowl, I need your help, he called out, releasing the Pokeball. The owl Pokémon materialized in a flash of light, hovering in the open air of the chasm, its wide, intelligent eyes blinking in the gloom. It let out a soft hoot, immediately sensing its trainer's distress. I need a lift, Ash said, his voice strained. Just get me to the top. Think you can handle it? Noctowl tilted its head, then puffed out its chest, giving a determined, confident cry. It swooped down, its powerful talons finding a secure grip on the thick material of Ash's backpack. Okay. Now, Ash grunted. Noctowl beat its powerful wings, the downdraft kicking up dust from the ledge. It strained, lifting Ash's full weight. The ascent was slow, agonizing. Ash's body swung like a pendulum, his injured shoulder screaming in protest every time he bumped against the rock face. He clenched his jaw, focusing on the shrinking distance, on Misty and Brock's encouraging shouts, on the hope of solid ground. As Noctowl cleared the lip of the chasm, strong hands grabbed him, hauling him the last few feet onto the rocky ground. He collapsed in a heap, his breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. The world spun, and for a moment, he thought he would pass out. Then he felt a gentle touch on his face, and his vision cleared. Misty was kneeling beside him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. For a second, he thought she was going to hug him. Instead, she smacked his arm. Ow! What was that for? He yelped. Don't you ever do that again. She snapped, her voice thick with a mixture of fury and profound relief. Falling into a chasm, fighting that thing. What were you thinking, Ash Ketchum? It worked, didn't it? He managed, a weak, stubborn grin touching his lips. You're an idiot, she said, but her hand was still on his arm, her grip gentle, grounding. Brock was already in medic mode, his fingers probing Ash's shoulder with a practiced touch. You're lucky it's not dislocated, but it's badly bruised. You're running on empty, Ash. Physically and whatever that other energy is you're using. You can't keep this up. Arian stood over him, his ancient eyes filled with a new, urgent gravity. Your friend is correct. The effort of modulating your power, even defensively, has taken a heavy toll. But I am afraid rest is a luxury we do not have. He pointed toward the jungle ahead. The path was gone, swallowed by a landscape that was actively, malevolently changing. The trees seemed to lean in closer, their branches twisting into grasping claws. The very air was shimmering, distorting the path ahead like a heat haze. We are entering the heart of the wound now, Arian said, his voice low. Kyogre's tormented dreams are becoming the landscape's nightmares. Be prepared for reality to bend. The shortest path to the volcano is now the only path. They helped Ash to his feet. He leaned on Brock for support, the simple act of standing an exhausting effort. As they moved forward, the wrongness of the jungle intensified. A stream they had to cross flowed the wrong way, its water running uphill with a sickening, unnatural sluggishness. The leaves of the trees seemed to whisper as they passed, not with the sound of the wind, but with a chorus of pained, incoherent voices that scraped at the edges of Ash's hearing. He saw things in the corner of his eye. fleeting shapes of shadow and light that vanished when he tried to look at them directly. Kyogre's pain was no longer just in his head, it was all around them, a tangible, suffocating presence. "This is bad," Silas muttered, his usual cynicism replaced by raw, primal fear. He kept glancing over his shoulder, as if expecting the ground they had just crossed to vanish. "This ain't natural. This is unholy." The pressure was mounting, and Ash felt his control slipping. The whispers of the leaves started to sound like his mother's voice, filled with worry. A flicker of shadow looked, for a heart-stopping second, like his Charizard, falling from the sky. He stumbled, his breath catching in his throat. "Ash, stay with us," Misty said, her voice sharp, cutting through the illusion. She grabbed his hand, her grip firm. "It's not real. It's the island. It's Kyogre. Don't listen." Her touch, her voice, was an anchor. He squeezed her hand, grateful for the connection, and pushed the phantoms away. He had to stay focused. For Kyogre. For them. After what felt like an eternity of walking through a waking nightmare, the twisted jungle finally began to thin. The oppressive canopy gave way to a blasted, open landscape of black volcanic rock and steaming fissures. In the center of it all, rising against the bruised purple of the evening sky, was the volcano. It was a jagged, angry peak, a plume of dark, foul-smelling smoke rising from its crater. The psychic scream was a physical, deafening roar here, a constant wave of agony that made the air itself vibrate. "The abyssal shrine is within the caldera," Arian said, his voice strained, a trickle of blood running from his nose from the sheer psychic pressure. "The entrance lies at the base of the western slope." They stood at the foot of the colossal mountain, a small, weary band of travelers at the gates of a sleeping god's hell. The ground was hot to the touch, and the air was thick with the smell of sulfur and ozone. This was the source. This was where the battle would be. But as they took their first steps onto the volcanic rock, a new sensation cut through the overwhelming roar of Kyogre's pain. It was a focused, piercing silence. A cold, clinical intelligence that felt utterly alien in this place of primal emotion. A shadow detached itself from the larger shadow of a rock outcropping. It didn't stomp or crash. It coalesced, rising from the ground like a phantom. It was another chimera. This one was slender, eerily graceful. Its torso was the sleek, white and green form of a Gardevoir, but its lower body was the four-legged, spider-like chassis of a Metagross, its heavy metal legs moving with a silent, terrifying speed. Where its arms should have been were the ethereal, grasping shadow claws of a Gengar, pulsing with a dark, non-light. And in the center of its chest, where a Gardevoir's red fin-like organ would be, was a single, unblinking red camera lens. Its head was tilted, as if in curiosity, its movements fluid and disturbingly intelligent. There was no roar, no mindless aggression. There was only a cold, silent, analytical presence. "Chimera Unit 02, a familiar, amplified voice echoed from a small drone hovering high above. It was Cypher. Calibrated to counter demonstrated abilities. Brute force is a crude instrument, catch 'em. Let's see how your power fares against a scalpel." Ash felt a chill that had nothing to do with his exhaustion. The first chimera was a blunt weapon, designed to crush him. This one was different. It was a psychic, a ghost, a steel-plated tank, and a stealth assassin all in one. It was built not just to defeat him, but to dismantle him. The chimera's head fins twitched, and a wave of pure psychic force slammed into them. It wasn't an attack designed to injure. It was designed to separate. Brock, Misty, Silas, and Arian were thrown backward, away from Ash, as if by an invisible giant's hand. Ash, at the epicenter, was held fast, pinned in place by the creature's immense telekinetic grip. Pikachu shrieked, sparks flying from its cheeks, but its electricity dissipated harmlessly against the psychic field. The camera lens in the chimera's chest glowed brighter. It wasn't just holding him. It was scanning him. He felt an intrusive, violating presence in his mind, cold and sharp like a surgeon's probe, trying to analyze the very nature of his power. He fought back, his own will a ragged shield against the intrusion, but he was so tired. The roar of Kyogre and the silent, piercing probe of the chimera were tearing him apart. This was their plan. Wear him down with the island, then send in a specialist to dissect him, mind and soul, before he could even reach his goal. He was out of options, out of strength, and for the first time, he felt a sliver of true, cold despair. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The two-way bridge. The Chimera's mind was a place of cold, sterile geometry. As its psychic probe bored into Ash, he wasn't just being held. He was being dissected. He felt his own memories, the joy of winning his first badge, the sting of losing the Indigo League, the simple warmth of sitting around a campfire with his friends, being extracted, catalogued, and dismissed as irrelevant emotional data. The entity wasn't looking for who he was. It was looking for what he was. It was tracing the pathways of his energy, trying to map the source of his power, the strange, impossible wellspring that allowed him to rewrite the laws of nature. His own thoughts were a frantic, desperate defense, a ragged wall of willpower against the relentlessly logical intrusion. But the wall was crumbling. The sheer psychic force of the probe, combined with the deafening, chaotic roar of Kyogre's agony, was too much. He could feel the Chimera's cold consciousness getting closer to the core of him, to the place where the power resided, and he knew that if it touched that place, if it understood it, he would be lost. It would either copy the ability, sever it, or turn it against him. "It's isolating him," Brock yelled, slamming his fist against the invisible psychic wall that held them back. "We can't get through, it's like hitting solid steel." "There has to be a weak point," Misty shouted, her Politoed firing a jet of water that flattened and slid off the barrier uselessly. "This is not a wall of force," Arian said, his voice grim as he wiped the blood from his lip. "It is a wall of focused intent. Its entire being is concentrated on the boy. To break through, we would need a psychic of equal or greater power." The Chimera's probe pushed deeper. Ash felt a phantom sensation, like cold fingers tracing the bond between him and Pikachu, who was struggling futilely in the telekinetic grip, his electrical sacs shorting out. The machine was learning, adapting. It saw the bonds as conduits, as the delivery system for his power. Threat assessment. High. Subject's ability is symbiotic with emotional connection. To neutralize catalyst, sever connections. The Chimera's intent shifted. It was no longer just scanning. It was preparing to cut. Ash felt a terror colder and sharper than anything he had ever known. It wasn't the fear of being hurt, or even of dying. It was the fear of being hollowed out, of having the most important parts of himself, his love for his Pokémon, surgically removed by a soulless machine. Despair was a rising tide, and he was drowning in it. He couldn't fight. He was too weak. He couldn't push the power out. It would be like trying to light a fire in a vacuum. He had nothing left. In that moment of absolute surrender, when his own will had failed, he did the only thing he could. He didn't try to push. He didn't try to fight. He simply reached. He sent a silent, desperate call down the bonds that the Chimera was trying to sever. It wasn't a command or a plea for power. It was just a feeling, a raw, unfiltered transmission of his own fear and desperation. "I'm sorry. I'm losing." He felt a faint answer from Pikachu, a surge of defiant loyalty. He felt a thrum from Pupitar's Pokeball, a feeling of unshakable solidarity. And then, he felt something else. A connection that had always been unique, a bond defined not by battle prowess or stubborn pride, but by pure, unconditional affection. He felt Bayleaf. And through that bond, something new happened. Something the Chimera, in all its cold calculations, had never predicted. Energy began to flow the other way. It wasn't the searing, reality-bending power Ash wielded. It was something gentler, yet infinitely more potent. It was the boundless, life-affirming energy of a grass-type Pokémon, the quiet, stubborn strength that allows a shoot to push its way through solid rock. It was the warmth of the sun on a green leaf. It was the smell of fresh soil after rain. It was pure, unfiltered life. And it was all infused with Bayleaf's fierce, unwavering love for him. It surged up the bond, not as a weapon, but as a gift. It wasn't a torrent of power to be wielded. It was a wave of healing, of support, of shared strength. "I am here. You are not alone." The Chimera reeled. The psychic probe, designed to analyze a one-way flow of catalytic energy from a single source, was suddenly inundated with a bilateral surge of an energy it could not classify. Life. Love. Loyalty. These were not variables in its equations. The raw, organic vitality that flooded the connection was like pouring water into a complex circuit board. It was a paradox. It was an impossibility. The Chimera let out a high-pitched shriek of electronic feedback. The cold, geometric precision of its mind shattered into a million chaotic fragments. The psychic barrier around Ash's friends dissolved with a sound like breaking glass. The telekinetic grip that held him vanished. Ash fell to his knees, gasping, the sudden silence in his head almost as jarring as the noise had been. The chimera stumbled back, the gardevoir part of its body clutching its head, the Gengar claws flickering in and out of existence. The red camera lens in its chest was cracked, spitting sparks. It was damaged, it was confused, and it was vulnerable. Now, Brock roared, already in motion. Golem, rock throw. Silas, get back, Misty yelled, protecting the old captain as she issued her own command. Politoed, bubble beam, full force. The battle was short and brutal. Golem's barrage of superheated rocks slammed into the chimera's Metagross legs, knocking it off balance. Polited's high-speed volley of bubbles struck the cracked camera lens, the rapid-fire impacts shattering it completely. The chimera shuddered, its limbs locking up. The light in its components flickered one last time and then died, leaving it a silent, smoking statue of mismatched parts. The immediate threat was over. Ash remained on his knees, his head bowed, his entire body trembling with the aftershock. He felt Bayleaf's presence receding, her energy spent, leaving behind a lingering warmth in his chest. He had been on the verge of annihilation, and she had pulled him back from the brink. It wasn't his power that had saved him, it was theirs. Misty and Brock were at his side in an instant, helping him to his feet. Ash, what was that? Misty asked, her voice hushed with awe. The whole thing just stopped. It was Bayleaf, Ash whispered, his voice hoarse. He looked at the Pokeball on his belt. A wave of gratitude so powerful it almost brought him to his knees again. The chimera, it was trying to cut our bond. She fought back through it. She sent her strength to me. Arian approached, his ancient face a mixture of wonder and deep solemnity. The machine saw the bond as a wire, a conduit for a weapon. It failed to understand that a bond is not a wire. It is a two-way bridge. You have always used it to give your strength to them. This time, they gave their strength to you. He placed a hand on Ash's uninjured shoulder. You are not a wielder of a strange power, Ash Ketchum. You are the heart of a community. That is a truth no machine can ever comprehend. And it is the only thing that may give you a chance in the chamber ahead. The old man's words settled over him, bringing a clarity that cut through the pain and exhaustion. He wasn't a weapon. He wasn't a child playing with a force he didn't understand. He was a partner. He was one half of a sacred promise, and that promise was his true strength. He straightened up, his resolve hardening into something new. It wasn't the brash confidence of a challenger or the stubborn defiance of a survivor. It was a quiet, profound certainty. He knew what he had to do. He turned to the volcano. The entrance to the abyssal shrine was a dark, gaping maw in the mountainside. A wound in the rock that seemed to exhale a palpable aura of pain. The psychic roar from within was a physical thing, a crushing wave of despair. But now, Ash could hear something else beneath it. A faint, slow, rhythmic beat. A giant, struggling heart. Park knows their last guard is down, Brock said, his voice grim as he looked at the ruined chimera. They know we're going in. Let them come, Ash said, his voice steady. He took a step toward the dark entrance. Pikachu, sensing the change in him, climbed to his familiar perch on his shoulder, his posture resolute. Silas, who had watched the entire exchange with a stunned silence, finally spoke. You're really going in there? Into the belly of that screaming beast? Kid, that's not a battle. That's a death wish. Ash looked back at the old sea captain, at the fear and awe in his eyes. Then he looked at Misty and Brock, at their unwavering, unconditional support. A Pokémon is in trouble, Ash said, as if that were the only explanation needed in the entire world. I'm going to help it. He turned and, leaning on his friends for physical support but bolstered by a newfound inner strength, he took the first step into the suffocating darkness of the abyssal shrine. The roar of the maddened god washed over him, but this time, he did not falter. He was a bridge, and he was ready to bear the weight. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Heart of the Storm. The inside of the volcano was not a place of fire and rock, it was a place of memory and pain. The air in the abyssal shrine was cold, a deep, oceanic chill that seemed to seep into their bones. The psychic roar of Kyogre's agony was so immense here that it was no longer a sound, but the very medium through which they moved. Every surface of the vast, cavernous chamber pulsed with a faint, sickly purple light, the physical manifestation of the shadow resonance. Strange, crystalline structures, like black, diseased coral, grew from the walls and floor, twisting into agonized shapes. In the center of the cavern was a vast, circular pool of water, as black and still as obsidian glass. The water did not reflect the pulsating light of the cavern. It seemed to absorb it, a vortex of pure, liquid shadow. And suspended in the air just above the pool, held in place by shimmering, almost invisible tendrils of dark energy, was the source of it all. Kyogre. The sea incarnate was a sight of both terrible majesty and profound tragedy. Its colossal form, which should have been a vibrant, powerful blue, was mottled with patches of sickly gray. Its eyes, which should have held the wisdom of the deep ocean, were closed, its massive body racked with tremors of constant, unending pain. Wrapped around its heart, visible through its semi-translucent skin, was a pulsating, cancerous-looking mass of the same black crystalline energy that infested the cavern. This was the core of the Shadow Resonance, a parasitic entity that was slowly killing a god. From that central mass, the purple veins of energy Ash had seen in his visions spread throughout Kyogre's body, and from there, they extended outwards, anchoring the legendary to the walls of the shrine. The entire cavern was the inside of Kyogre's prison, and the prison was its own body. By all the seas, Silas breathed, his voice a choked whisper. He stumbled back, physically repulsed by the sheer scale of the suffering before them. "This is worse than I feared," Arian said, his face ashen. "The resonance is not just an infection. It has formed a symbiotic, parasitic bond. It is feeding on Kyogre's divine energy, growing stronger as it drains the life from its host." Before they could formulate a plan, a cold, familiar voice echoed from the shadows on the far side of the cavern. "A touching reunion. But the guest of honor is not yet ready to receive visitors." Spectre emerged from the darkness, no longer in a pristine suit, but in a tactical, armored version of the park uniform. He was flanked by Cypher and Raid, and behind them, a small army of park commandos in sleek, black armor fanned out, their advanced weapons aimed directly at Ash and his friends. "Your persistence is irritating, Ketchum," Spectre said, his voice laced with a cold, condescending amusement. "But ultimately, it is irrelevant. You are too late. The bonding process is nearly complete. Soon, we will have what we came for. A legendary Pokémon, perfectly attuned to the Shadow Resonance, ready to be controlled, commanded. A living weapon to bring a new, orderly era to this chaotic world." "You're insane," Misty spat, her hand on a Pokeball. "You're killing it." "A necessary price for progress," Spectre countered, gesturing to the tormented legendary as if it were a piece of machinery. "We are not the ones who wounded it. We merely took advantage of the opportunity this alien entity provided. Now, surrender the catalyst. Your journey ends here." Ash barely heard him. He couldn't take his eyes off Kyogre. He could feel its pain, its confusion, its slow, inexorable slide into oblivion. He could also feel the cold, alien intelligence of the Shadow Resonance, a feeling of pure, predatory hunger. He knew, with a certainty that transcended Arian's wisdom and Spectre's science, that if he didn't act now, there would be nothing left to save. He looked at his friends, at the small, defiant group standing against an army. He looked at the dying god in the center of the room. And he felt the quiet, steady warmth of the two-way bridge, the unwavering support of his team. He knew what he had to do. "Brock, Misty," he said, his voice quiet but clear over the psychic din. "Buy me some time. Just keep them busy." "What are you going to do?" Brock asked, his eyes wide with alarm. "I'm going to talk to it," Ash said simply. He turned to face the pool. "Ash, no," Misty cried, grabbing his arm. "Arian said it would kill you." The feedback. He gently removed her hand, his gaze meeting hers. The stubborn fire in his eyes was banked, replaced by a calm, deep resolve that was far more powerful. "I'm not a child with a match anymore, Misty. I'm a bridge. I have to try." Before she could argue, he walked to the edge of the black pool. The park commandos raised their weapons, but Spectre held up a hand, a look of intrigued curiosity on his face. "Let him. I want to see this. I want to see what happens when a fool tries to reason with a hurricane." Ash closed his eyes. He ignored the commandos, his friends, the cold presence of Spectre. He ignored the very room around him. He focused everything he was, every ounce of his will, his love for his Pokémon, his memories of triumph and failure, into a single point. He reached out, not with the searing fire of his catalytic power, but with the quiet, steady connection he had discovered with Bayleaf. He reached for the tormented consciousness of the god before him. He didn't try to push, or heal, or command. He just connected. He opened the bridge. I'm here. The world dissolved. He was no longer in a cavern. He was in an endless, black ocean, adrift in a silent, cold void. Below him, he saw a colossal, sleeping eye, and he felt a consciousness so vast, so ancient, that his own felt like a single grain of sand on an infinite beach. He felt Kyogre's dreams. Dreams of a young world, of carving the oceans with its brother Groudon, of a deep, peaceful slumber beneath the waves. Then, he felt the arrival of the wound. It was a thing of sharp, cold angles, of a hunger that was anathema to life. It had fallen from the stars, a shard of cosmic wrongness that had pierced Kyogre's sleeping spirit. He felt Kyogre's confusion, its pain as the entity burrowed into its heart, the slow, agonizing process of its life force being siphoned away, its dreams turning to nightmares. And then, he felt Kyogre feel him. The ancient consciousness stirred. The colossal eye began to open. It focused on the tiny, insignificant speck of warmth that was Ash's spirit in its endless, lonely darkness. Who are you? The voice was not a sound, but a wave of pure thought that threatened to overwhelm him. My name is Ash, he sent back, his own thought a tiny, flickering candle in the dark. I'm a friend. In the cavern, Ash's body had gone rigid. A soft, gentle blue aura, the color of a pure ocean current, began to emanate from him, pushing back against the sickly purple glow of the resonance. What is he doing? Cypher murmured, her analytical mind unable to process what she was seeing. The energy readings were impossible. He's communing with it, Arian breathed, his eyes wide with a reverence that bordered on fear. He is not trying to command it. He is trying to understand it. The battle erupted around them. Brock's Golem and Misty's Gyarados, summoned in a flash, met the charge of Raid's own augmented Aggron in a wave of park Pokémon. The cavern filled with the sounds of explosions, the hiss of water, and the clash of steel, a chaotic symphony of violence around the still point of Ash's silent communion. In the psychic ocean, Kyogre's eye focused on him completely. The rage and pain were still there, a hurricane surrounding the calm center where they conversed, but there was also a flicker of something else. Curiosity. You feel familiar, Kyogre projected. Like the little ones. The ones I protect. They're my friends, Ash replied. My family. Just like you're their family. The whole ocean's family. And you're hurting. The pain lanced through their connection, a wave of pure agony that made Ash's physical body cry out. He saw flashes of PARC's ships, of their harpoons and energy nets, of them aggravating the wound, twisting the cold, alien parasite into an engine of rage. They hurt me, Kyogre pulsed, its rage building, threatening to shatter their fragile connection. They use my pain. I know. And I'm here to help you fight them, Ash sent, pouring all his conviction, all his stubborn, unwavering belief in his Pokémon, into the thought. But you have to fight the other thing first. The cold thing inside you. You have to push it out, and you can't do it alone. He felt a wave of profound, ancient weariness from the legendary. Tired, so tired, it is, a part of me now. This was it. The critical moment. The resonance had bonded too deeply. Kyogre didn't have the strength to expel it on its own. It had accepted the parasite as a part of itself. He couldn't just heal the wound. He had to convince Kyogre to let it be healed. He couldn't force it. That would make him no better than Spectre, but maybe he could show it the way. He opened the bridge fully. He didn't just project his own thoughts. He invited Kyogre in. He showed it everything. He showed it Larvitar, trembling in fear before becoming a Titan. He showed it Tailo, a silver blur of impossible speed. He showed it Pupitar, an unbreakable shield of pure will. He showed it Bayleaf, her love a healing wave across a two-way bridge. He showed it the nature of his power. Not as a weapon, but as a promise. The promise of what a being could become. This is what it means to evolve, Ash projected, the thought not his own, but a synthesis of the shared will of his entire team. It is not just about changing your body. It is about changing your hope. You can become more than your pain. He felt a seismic shift in the ancient consciousness. A flicker of hope, the first in a long, dark age. A desire to be healed. A willingness to fight. Show me, Kyogre pulsed. That was all he needed. Permission. In the cavern, Ash's blue aura exploded outward. He opened his eyes, and they were no longer brown. They were glowing with the same pure, oceanic light. The energy readings are off the scale. A park technician screamed from the back line. It's merging with the catalyst's field. Impossible. Spectre snarled, his composure finally cracking. Fire everything you have. Bring him down now. The commandos opened fire, unleashing a volley of plasma bolts and energy beams. But they never reached him. A shimmering wall of blue energy, an extension of Ash's own aura, erupted from the ground around him, effortlessly absorbing the entire barrage. Ash took a deep breath. He felt Kyogre's ancient, divine power flowing into him, and his own catalytic, human energy flowing into the legendary. The two-way bridge was now a roaring, interdimensional highway. He felt a strength he had never imagined, a power that could reshape continents. And he knew, with chilling certainty, that it would burn him out, that his mortal body could not contain this for long. He had one shot. We're going to do this together, he whispered. He raised his hands, palms facing the tormented god. The blue aura around him coalesced, focusing into a single, brilliant point of light between his hands. It was the color of the deep sea, of a healthy coral reef, of life itself. It was pure, unfiltered, catalytic potential. He didn't scream a command. He didn't force his will. He made an offer, a gift. Evolve. He pushed the ball of pure, life-affirming energy forward. It didn't fly like an attack. It drifted, gentle and serene, across the black water of the pool and touched the cancerous, crystalline mass on Kyogre's heart. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a sound like 1,000 ringing bells filled the cavern. The ball of blue light sank into the black crystal, and from the point of contact, a wave of pure, oceanic blue began to spread. It was a cleansing fire, a purifying wave that incinerated the sickly purple of the resonance. The black crystal began to crack, to dissolve, not with a violent explosion, but by simply ceasing to be, overridden by the potent, life-giving energy Ash had channeled. Kyogre's body began to glow. It wasn't the slow, shimmering light of a normal evolution. It was the light of a sunrise after a long, dark night. The gray, sickly patches on its skin vanished, replaced by a deeper, more vibrant blue. The red lines on its body began to glow with a golden light, a primal energy that had been suppressed for ages. The tendrils of dark energy holding it captive dissolved into nothingness. The great beast's eyes snapped open. They were no longer clouded with pain. They were clear, ancient, and filled with an immense, terrifying power. It wasn't just healed. It had changed. It had become primal Kyogre. With a roar that was not of pain, but of pure, reclaimed power, primal Kyogre descended into the black pool. The water, once a vortex of shadow, erupted into a geyser of pure, steaming water that struck the roof of the cavern. The psychic feedback hit Ash like a physical blow. The bridge slammed shut as Kyogre reclaimed its own mind. The divine power receded, leaving a vacuum that was 1,000 times worse than the exhaustion he had felt before. The light in his eyes faded. His legs gave out. He pitched forward, his consciousness dissolving into blackness, collapsing toward the roiling water. He never hit it. Misty was there, catching him, pulling him back from the edge, his name a desperate, ragged cry on her lips. Primal Kyogre rose from the pool, its body crackling with the raw power of the ocean. It turned its immense, ancient gaze upon the park forces. And for the first time in their lives, Spectre, Cypher, and Raid knew the true, undiluted meaning of fear. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Dawn of the Catalyst. The rage of a god was a beautiful and terrible thing to behold. Primal Kyogre did not move with the ponderous grace of a whale. It moved with the impossible, instantaneous speed of a storm front. One moment it was rising from the steaming pool, the next it was before the park forces, its colossal form eclipsing the sickly purple light of the cavern. The air grew heavy, crackling with ozone and the pressure of 1,000 atmospheres. Spectre, for the first time in his meticulously controlled life, felt a tremor of genuine, primal fear. The neat, predictable lines of his world, data, control, manipulation, had just been obliterated by a force that defied every known metric. Fire! He screamed, his voice cracking, the order a reflex of a man whose only answer to the unknown was violence. All units, concentrate fire, subdue it. The Par C commandos, trained to obey without question, unleashed a torrent of plasma, laser, and concussive energy. The cavern, already a chaotic battlefield, became a hellscape of strobing lights and deafening explosions. The barrage, enough to level a small city, struck Primal Kyogre's flank and dissipated with a harmless fizz, like raindrops sizzling on a hot iron. The legendary Pokémon didn't even seem to notice. It turned its ancient, golden eyes that had seen the birth of continents, upon the soldiers. It did not roar. It did not need to. It simply opened its mouth, and a beam of pure, pressurized water, thinner than a spear but more potent than 1,000 tidal waves, shot forth. The origin pulse was not a wild spray. It was a surgical instrument of divine wrath. It carved a perfect, silent line through the park ranks, striking not the soldiers, but their weapons. Every rifle, every cannon, every piece of advanced technology it touched was instantly, violently disassembled into its component parts, leaving the commandos holding nothing but smoking, useless handles. In the span of a single heartbeat, Spectre's army was disarmed. Raid, a man built for conflict, reacted on pure instinct. He roared a challenge and hurled the Pokeball of his last and most powerful creation, a monstrous, wire-augmented Tyranitar. The beast materialized, its eyes glowing with the faint, dying remnants of the shadow resonance, and let out a defiant cry. Kyogre didn't even look at it. With a flick of its massive tail fin, a wave of solid, shimmering water coalesced from the humid air and slammed into the Tyranitar, extinguishing the purple light in its eyes and sending it crashing into the cavern wall, unconscious. The message was clear. This was not a battle. This was a judgment. Cypher, ever the analyst, was already moving. Seeing the utter futility of a direct confrontation, she grabbed Spectre's arm, her voice a low, urgent hiss. "Sir, we must withdraw. The acid is lost. The mission is a failure. We can't win this." Spectre stared, his face a mask of disbelief, watching as a being of myth and legend systematically and calmly dismantled his entire force without causing a single casualty. He was not being defeated. He was being dismissed. Humiliated. He, who had orchestrated this entire operation, who had stood on the cusp of controlling a god, was being treated as nothing more than a nuisance. His cold fury overrode his fear. "This isn't over, Ketchum," he snarled, his eyes finding the small, huddled group of Ash and his friends, who were watching the scene unfold with a mixture of terror and awe. He keyed a detonator on his wrist gauntlet. "If I cannot have this power, then no one will." The black, crystalline structures that infested the cavern began to glow with a blinding, unstable red light. Alarms, shrill and desperate, blared from hidden speakers. "He's rigged the entire shrine to blow," Brock yelled, his geologist's mind instantly grasping the catastrophic implications. "If these crystals go up, they'll destabilize the volcano's magma chamber. The whole island will be destroyed." Primal Kyogre turned its attention to the glowing crystals, a low, guttural rumble of displeasure emanating from its throat. But there were too many, the chain reaction already starting. Arian stepped forward, his face grim. He closed his eyes and slammed his palms together. A massive, shimmering blue shield of psychic energy erupted from him, enveloping Ash, Misty, Brock, and Silas. "My power cannot contain the full blast," he said, his voice strained, sweat beading on his forehead. "But it will shield you from the worst of it. Go." Kyogre has opened a path. He was right. As the red glow intensified, Kyogre unleashed another, broader origin pulse, not as an attack, but as a tool. It struck the back wall of the cavern, and with the sound of tearing rock, carved a perfect, smooth tunnel that sloped upwards, leading directly to the open sky of the caldera. There was no time for goodbyes. With a shared look of desperate understanding, Brock and Silas half-carried, half-dragged the still unconscious Ash toward the newly formed escape route. Misty followed, her face pale, casting one last, worried look back at the lone, defiant figure of Arian, holding back the apocalypse with nothing but his own will. Spectre, Cypher, and Raid were already gone, having escaped through their own hidden tunnel the moment the detonator was pressed. They had lost the prize, but they would not lose their lives. As Ash's friends scrambled up the tunnel, the world behind them turned white. The explosion was utterly silent. Arian's shield flared, held for a single, eternal second against the tide of annihilating energy, and then vanished. There was a lurch, a sensation of falling and rising at the same time, and then they were tumbling out of the tunnel into the open air of the volcano's crater, just as Primal Kyogre shot past them, a blue comet ascending to the heavens. The entire peak of the volcano collapsed inwards, the abyssal shrine, the park equipment, and the brave old observer all consumed in a cataclysmic implosion that sent a mushroom cloud of steam and ash miles into the sky. Ash woke to the gentle rocking of waves and the smell of clean, salt air. He was lying on something soft. He blinked, his vision blurry, and saw the familiar, concerned faces of Misty and Brock leaning over him. Pikachu was curled on his chest, a small, warm weight. "Hey," he managed, his voice a dry croak. Misty let out a sob of pure relief, and this time, she didn't hit him. She just gently squeezed his hand. "You're awake." "What happened?" he asked, his mind a jumble of black oceans, dying gods, and a final, blinding flash of light. "You saved him, Ash," Brock said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved Kyogre. It got us out. It put us on this, and brought us out to sea." Ash pushed himself up. He was on the back of a massive, gentle Wailord, which was swimming calmly in the open ocean. A small flotilla of other water Pokémon, Lapras, Dugong, even a few curious Sharpedo, swam alongside them, a silent, respectful escort. Silas was a few feet away, mending a fishing net with practiced hands, a look of quiet, profound contemplation on his face. The island was a smudge on the horizon, a plume of clean, white steam rising from where the angry volcano had once stood. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. The unnatural weather patterns were gone. The world felt clean, at peace. A shadow fell over them. Ash looked up and his breath caught in his throat. Primal Kyogre was hovering in the air above them, its colossal form eclipsing the sun. The golden light of its primal markings pulsed with a gentle, rhythmic beat, like a healthy heart. It looked down at them, its ancient eyes no longer filled with pain or rage, but with a deep, boundless wisdom. It focused on Ash. He felt its voice in his mind again, no longer a scream of agony, but a calm, resonant wave of pure gratitude. "The bridge you opened, it remains," Kyogre projected. "The wound is healed, but the path is not closed. You have changed me, little catalyst, and I, you." Ash felt a strange sensation, a faint, lingering echo of the divine power he had channeled. It wasn't the searing, overwhelming force from the cavern, but a quiet, deep reservoir of energy that now resided within him. It felt stable, a part of him. "The world is larger than you know," Kyogre continued. "The shadow that wounded me is but a splinter of a greater darkness that falls between the stars. Others will come. But now, the world has a new kind of champion. Not one of simple strength, but one of becoming, of potential." The legendary dipped its head in a gesture of profound respect, a god bowing to a mortal. "Live well, Ash Ketchum. Grow strong. Be the bridge." With a final, powerful beat of its fins, Primal Kyogre rose into the sky, summoned a swirl of storm clouds, and vanished into a waterspout that connected the sea to the heavens. Silence descended, broken only by the gentle lapping of the waves. Ash sat there for a long time, looking at the spot where the god had been. He felt different. The frantic, desperate energy that had defined his flight was gone. The fear and confusion were gone. In their place was a quiet, deep sense of purpose. He was no longer just a trainer on a journey to be the best. He was something more. He looked at his friends, at the small, loyal family that had followed him into the heart of a nightmare. He looked at Pikachu, who was looking back at him, his dark eyes filled with a new, deeper understanding. "So," Misty said softly, breaking the silence, "what now?" Ash looked out at the endless, open ocean, at the horizon that promised 1,000 new adventures. He thought of Spectre, of the director, of the cold, calculating evil of Park. He thought of the splinter of a greater darkness. His journey wasn't over. In a way, it was just beginning. A slow, confident smile spread across his face, the first genuine, untroubled smile he'd had in what felt like a lifetime. It was the smile of a boy who had faced a god and found a friend. It was the smile of a champion who had finally discovered the true nature of his mastery. "What now?" he repeated, his voice clear and strong, echoing across the water. "Now, we get stronger. All of us, together." Chapter 10 End.